This video is going to introduce you to an online debugger, and it's also going to talk about two-dimensional arrays. I'm going to log out so you can kind of see how I access this. And I just Googled GDB online C++ or something like that, but the website is www.onlinegdb.com. And when you get there, you should be able to just log in with your Google account, or it also accepts a GitHub account. And so those of you that have a GitHub and want to start to get used to that environment, that actually would be a good idea. I do not know why it's taking so long to log me out. I wanted to show this because if I go to log in, when I clicked on Google+, the screen that just came up said I logged in successfully off there to the left, but it didn't look like I logged in. And so I actually clicked on it twice, or again, and then you can see that I am logged in. So it did log me in with Google+. And then you can just click on Create a New Project, and it'll bring up a screen. You do have to select the language over here. And I don't think it matters what version of C++ that you are using. We will work with and have to set up what we've been working with. The pound include studio.h here is a we haven't used that library. We go ahead and put in our pound include IOStream, and we're also going to pound include or put in using namespace standard. And if this is kind of a nice, it does have an IntelliSense. So if you look here, if I start to type namespace, it recognizes it. If I hit the tab key, it fills it in. And so using namespace standard. And that way, instead of using a printf, which is actually a kind of a holdover from C, then I can use the cout command, and we should be able to click run in order to run this debugger. Okay, and if you look down below, your console down here is running that code. So now I am going to go back to Blackboard, and I am going to copy. I believe I can do this. It's not probably recommended necessarily. I'm going to copy that code for the two-dimensional array that they had set up, just to kind of maybe borrow some of the code that's already written. And you can see it did not copy very well because I have to delete the line numbers here. But while I'm doing that, take a look at the screen and take a look at how this two-dimensional array is set up. Two-dimensional arrays have rows and they have columns. And so we set up two constant variables in order to work with a two-dimensional array. I am going to create a two-dimensional array that is going to be a multiplication table. And so, because I want to be able to make my multiplication table any size, I want to set up, and I will often, just to kind of show you my style here, I will often create the constants as just rows and columns. Number of rows, number of columns is probably more accurate, but I often do just rows and columns here. Those are constants. And this particular program kept or tracked an accumulator. We're not going to use that, so I'm going to delete that. We are going to create an integer array, and it is going to be rows by columns. I am not going to use an initialization list, so I'm going to delete that out. So I do have to give it a size. So if I want to, how do I do that? So if I go back and I take a look at this previous example here, or I look at some of my textbook examples, you don't have to assign it a new or anything like you would in Java. This is how you initialize it right there. So my code should have initialized, if I put a semicolon here, a two-dimensional array that will be whatever rows and columns that I set. Then when I go to write my outer loop, this outer loop controls the rows. So I start with row at 0. I go to less than rows, because if I did less than or equal to, I would get a bounds error, and then I increment my rows one at a time. Likewise with columns, I'm going to go from 0 to the number of columns. But now I'm going to fill my array. If I want to fill my array, two-dimensional array, I am going to use numbers, but actually I might actually change the name of this to be more descriptive. This is a multiplication table, which means I'm going to have to change my name on my initialization here. And it lets me use IntelliSense to do that. But what I have to do is assign it a value. Well, a multiplication table is rows times column. And so it's going to be rows times columns. Now, one thing that the examples have not done so far is, because this was a one line of code inside that for loop, they did not put in a beginning and ending brace for the second loop for the columns. I'm going to recommend that you put in those beginning and ending braces, okay? And so that right there will fill our multiplication table. We are now going to want to display this multiplication table. And if we take a look at the code, I actually copied the code here that would fill our table down below. I'm going to use the same setup in order to print the multiplication table to the screen. And so instead of printing or filling, we're just going to see out, and I might set a width of, well, let's just see out as it is right now. And this is going to print a column, excuse me, it's going to print a row at a time. I am going to want to probably put a space or two between the numbers, and so we'll just put in a space. But we don't want to hit the end of the row until we get to the end of the row, so we're not going to end out until in the outer loop. So we have to do our outputting here in the inner loop, and then we're going to output our the end out in the outside the column loop, but inside the row loop. Let's go ahead and run and see if this executes. And we have errors, of course. Nothing's going to work the first time. So it looks like we are missing a bracket here. And we'll try it again. And we have another error, and that is total. I didn't delete some of the code that was left over from the previous example, so we are getting closer. And this is going to display the multiplication table and see if we have success. So there's our multiplication table. Because I did start with multiplying by 0, we do have this 0, 0 on the outside, and we may want to fix that. Okay, but for the purposes of this video, it did print a table. If you do see, though, it is kind of a little bit, it's not printing lined up, for example, right here, which is where I was going to actually try a set width command inside here. And if I do a set width of, let's say, 4 for every item, then potentially, and I don't remember if I have to change a pound include or not on that. I do, and I believe set width was with my pound include IO manip, so let's see if we can put that in there. And I also had looked up at the top of this online debugger. There's this link here that says Beautify. I've been wanting to try to see that if it works. So I'm copying that code in case it all messes up. But I'm hoping that that might fix some of my spacing, because some of my spacing is off, but it didn't. But let me highlight everything and then click. I don't know if that did anything. So anyway, play around with that on the online debugger. But now let's see how this executes and see if my we have a fatal error. No such file or directory. So I messed something up. My error was mistyping IO manip. You guys probably already saw that. And so when we execute, we do get the multiplication table printed out down below. That's going to be it for this video. We'll work with this just a little bit more, probably to show you how to write some functions using arrays as well.